good morning, and I am back. Back with a young lady who has quite a story. She's an author, she's a hard worker, she's a wife, a mother, and she writes about the things that a lot of us would like. It's fiction, too. It's mostly fiction. T.L. Criswell, good morning.
Good morning, Miss Perryman. Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great. Wasn't that interesting, that last segment about entrepreneurship and everything?
Oh, awesome, awesome. About the business, yes,
Well,
definitely.
you're an entrepreneur. I hope you listen.
Right.
I'm trying to listen
Mhm.
myself. Now, let's look. Okay, first, she has these two books out here. She has The Peacemaker, but I'm going to have you talk about it and read the poem from it just as soon as we find out a little more about T.L. Criswell. So put this right up there, just real quick. I have her book too. Okay. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Inkster, Michigan,
Inkster.
back in the 70s, so that's where
You,
I'm from.
you know what was interesting? I just found out the other day Lester Holt's father came from Inkster.
Awesome.
Yeah, Lester Holt, who is on the news.
So was he raised in Inkster
No, he
also?
wasn't.
Oh,
No, he
okay, his
wasn't.
family.
Right,
Okay,
right,
okay.
right. But I thought that that was so interesting. So, I mean, he was talking about the connections that he had to Detroit.
Okay,
Right.
okay. I never knew that.
And so after high school,
Hmm.
did you go to the service?
Yes, I went to the military,
She was
and
in the military.
after high school, I went to the military.
What branch?
I went to the Army Reserves.
Wow. Did you enjoy it?
Well, no, I was scared. So I went because after high school I had to do something. So I'm happy that I went because I learned discipline, I learned respect, and it made me a better person. So in the beginning I was nervous, so I joined right out of high school. But after that, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Did you ever have to travel with that?
Actually, I only did reserves, but in 1990, when Desert Storm came, I had to go over to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. I was in a garrison unit, and we shipped the soldiers overseas for war. And then when we shipped everybody over, they were saying that we were going to have to go overseas, and then the war was over. So I lucked out.
Yeah.
So I did that for a
Woo!
year. Right,
No.
I did that for a year. Awesome.
Wow. That was really brave of you.
Right. Well, I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice, but it actually, I
I mean,
love.
to even enlist. I thought that that was so brave
Right.
because during that time I wrote a poem called Madison Avenue because at that time they were telling people go to the army and get an education.
Right.
Remember?
Right.
And the poem I wrote was about a young man who went to the army to get this education, but he didn't make it.
Okay.
And what lured him was the education. And
Okay.
he says, all I wanted was an education. I didn't know I'd fight a war.
Wow.
Mama and Daddy had no college money, so I decided to be all that I could be.
All right.
I went with half of mine through basic training, waiting for my book learning to start, but here I am laying in the desert with a bullet clean through my heart. See, all I wanted was an education, and the ads promised to pay my way, but I never, ever, ever thought they'd be laying flowers on my grave today. And it was because one of my former students went to the Army. He did not die,
Okay.
but it was just about that education
Okay,
piece. You know,
okay.
it's the way the Army was marketed
Right.
back then.
Right. Right.
Wow. Gee,
Right.
you were really brave. I don't think I would have done it. I really appreciate your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
Golly.
Thank you.
So you were in there for how many years?
I did a total of 6 years reserves. So then after that, I started working for Chrysler.
Oh, so you started working for Chrysler.
Right. Wait a minute.
After that? Or-
After I got out of the military, I did nails for a while. I was an entrepreneur. I opened up a nail salon, and then Chrysler called, so I did a nail salon and I did
So you,
Chrysler.
when Chrysler called, you just folded up your nail salon?
And I had just opened my nail salon, and I was thinking about folding. And then my mom and my family, they was like, "No, you try to do both." So I did both for about 8 years, and then after that, I wanted to start a family, so I had to let the salon go, and I worked at Chrysler, and then I started my family.
So, TL,
Yes.
When did you discover that you could write?
Actually, when I was in school, I used to always write poems, and the only time I can write is when I'm inspired. When I write poems, if something happened, if I'm sad or something happened and I'm inspired, that's when I started writing. So I started writing when I was a little girl, just little simple poems. And this book right here actually came from a poem. I was watching television one day, and I saw a young man on the news that I recognized, and I was like, wow. And he was on the wrong side of the law. And so instantly I was at work, and in about 5 minutes these words came to my head, and it was called Stolen Opportunities.
Can you share that with us?
So this book was based off of Stolen Opportunities, and the poem says, I never had the chance to be all that I could be. Opportunities I should have had were stolen away from me. My mother was a hustler, my father was the same. I was conceived out of lust, so understand my pain. No one ever tried to bring out the best in me. If I was only shown some love, no telling who or what I'd be. I was dealt a bad hand that I was forced to play. Before I reached 15, my mother was taken away. My dad was left to raise me, and it's hard to understand why he never took the time to teach me how to be a man. My life was lived so fast. To me, this was the norm. Sometimes I often wonder, why was I even born? So to each and every parent that plans to have a child, take the snapshot of my life and think about it for a while. And so after I wrote that poem, I would go places and I would recite it. People, they just loved it. So I was thinking like, okay, well, maybe, and I had it self-published, and I was like, well, maybe I'll turn it into a short story. So actually, I turned it into a short story. So actually, the first chapter of this book, it's a lot of information in it. It's a story, but it's a lot of detail in it. And then after that, I let people read that, and they was like, well, what happened to the rest? So when they asked me that about 2 years later, I wrote the entire book with the help of a mentor. So that's how this book right here came about, from that poem.
And your mentor is Ben Smith.
My mentor is Mr. Ben Smith, right. And when I wrote this book, all I wanted to do was just paint a picture of just how sometimes how we have children and we invest in them externally instead of internally. And so when I wrote this book, everybody, you know, everybody loved this book. And
you've done different places around the country, right?
Right. Well, I've been to Tennessee, I've been to Atlanta, and then I've done some local book clubs. And so after this book, everybody, they was like, okay, we need more, we need more. So after that, this book right here, Peace on That, has came about.
Well, did you think after you wrote that first book that was, oh, I'm just going to write that book and I'll just go on about my business?
That's it. That's it. I never imagined that I would have another book.
Why don't you tell us a little more about Peacemaker, what it's about?
Okay, Peacemaker, this book right here, and like I told Miss Perryman, I love to do poetry, so everything, I try to summarize everything in poems. So this book is about 15-year-old Jason Jackson. He finds himself sequestered in a cell. He's hoping to regain his freedom, but things aren't going so well. The judge begins to scold him. 2 years is such a small price. You shot your best friend Michael. You ruined that young man's life. The story takes you back to how it all began. His parents never administered discipline. They chose to be his friend. So basically, this is a story.
Oh, you know, me and Jaleesa, our production assistant, were just talking about that when we were coming to the studio, the fact that too many of these parents want to be friends with their kids. Wow.
So that's what this story is about. It's about a young man who had young parents, and they chose to be his friend, and his grandparents was left to raise him. So when his grandparents were left to raise him, his parents would come in, and their form of love was just toys and gifts and all of that stuff. So he got messed up and ended up on the wrong side of the law. So that's what this book is about.
Okay, now, is this a sequel?
Okay, the piece on that is a sequel and a prequel. So this will be about his parents. So this is how his parents' life started. In this book right here, it doesn't just have, it has several main characters. So I can't tell you one main character to it has several main characters. And that this book right here, it goes through the generations. I went back to the Great Depression.
Right.
I went through the Detroit riots, and I just had some fun with it. And it's an awesome story, and it comes together full circle. It's greed, avarice, the things that people would do to reach success, whether good or bad. They all take different avenues. So it's really it's an interesting book, and everybody that reads it, they just love it. They love it.
Right. I think you have quite a career ahead of you. This thing about we are a lot of times a result of what happened before we came into being.
Right.
Our adulthood and everything. A lot of our values are brought from who raised us
Right.
or what we were around. But some people, despite maybe having a bad childhood, they use that to make lemonade out of those lemons.
Yes.
Some people just fell into it, well, they didn't do anything, and it's a generational thing, and
Right.
I just hate it. I really, really hate it how people pass that along to their kids,
Right.
that everything's not possible.
Right.
And I saw a lot of that as a teacher. There are a lot of people out there think, well, this is about as good as I could do.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I think you have to be accountable for your own actions. You can't make excuses. And someone told me, my mentor, he told me the other day, he was talking about Forrest Gump. I said, well, I saw the movie years ago. He said, well, go rent that movie
It's
again.
a good movie.
And so when I rented it this time, now I understood it. And that movie was so powerful. It moved me because this man was handicapped and he never made excuses. He kept pushing forward. So I think we need more men to step up. We need more fathers to step up. I mean, we need to embrace our children, give them hugs, not a belt. Because I wrote an article about denial or ignorance. It won't, it won't fix your child when you want to deny that something is wrong with them. Because I struggle with ADD. Sometimes you're all over the place, and a lot of times we need to stop and try to understand our children instead of just thinking that we can just beat it out of them, because you can't beat a child into submission. You need to give them a hug and love and just things like that. So that's what really saddens
It's
me.
like two planes. Some people want to beat them.
Right.
Then some people don't want to do anything to. I can't tell you the amount of parents who came up and, it was never the child's fault.
Right.
It was always either the teacher or the administrator. And when you start hearing children say, oh, well, Mr. Smith didn't like me, and then, oh, Miss Jones, she doesn't like me either. And none of the teachers like them. I got to get out of there because they don't like us. And it becomes a pattern. And it ends up becoming a pattern with their lives. I've seen parents of students who were always late. And one father was so honest. He came and sat right there. His daughter was right there. He said, I just got fired from my job, and I got fired from my job for being late all the time. Baby, I'm trying to tell you the right thing. So, I mean, the men have to step up, and the women, if they're a single mom, they just have to stay up.
They have to
stay up.
Yes.
And not sacrifice their children to have a man around,
Right.
And stuff like that. But it'd be so great if more men stepped up.
Yes, yes. We need more role models. And like you said, we have to live it. So sometimes, and to me, when you're raising kids, it's something as simple as crossing the street, like taking your child to the crosswalk and showing them how to properly cross the street, because sometimes it's rules for a reason. When I used to drop my kids off at school, there's this one parent, she would go all the way to this and let her child run across the street, and then this car is coming, and I'm like, oh, wow. It's so sad. So you have to do something as small as teaching them how to cross the street, or just like Miss Perryman said, being on time, because I teach my kids every day. We have our code of honor in our houses. Do the right thing even when no one is watching. And so that means even if I'm parking somewhere, if I'm running in CVS, if I'm going to get one thing, if everything is full and it's a handicap, I will not park in that handicap because they're watching me. It was like last year I was dropping my son off at basketball practice, and it was snowing outside. And so when I was pulling up to drop him off, it was a handicap, but I was trying to back in. So I was pulling into the handicap, and he said, you getting ready to park in this handicap? I said, no, I'm backing in so I could back in and wait on you. He said, oh, okay. And so it's little things like
They're
that.
watching.
Yes, they're watching. They're watching.
Because when you raise your children, you're raising your grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
See, your legacy is important. What you teach them is important. My mother was always an hour early for work. I watched that. And so when I'm running late, I said, I can't be running late. And then I noticed my children are always on time. So, you set the the pattern. You raise your children, you're raising your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so forth.
Awesome.
I believe that.
Awesome.
And where can we get the piece?
Piece on that right
piece
there.
on that.
You can buy that online at Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Outskirts Press, or I have a website at www.tlcriswell.com. You can.
And that's Criswell, Criswell.
Yes. And you can reach out on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that.
I have to know this. Are you going to write another book?
Everyone asking me that, and I don't know.
You got the fever.
I know.
This just came out. I've written 4 books.
Oh, okay.
And I never know. I said I'm done, and then more poems start coming. I
And
had to do it.
you have to write.
And I started performing them out in different places, and they said, "Is that in the book?" And I said, "Shoot, I got to come up with another book."
Right. I have people ask me that all the time, but this book took 3 years, and this book took 3 years. So now it just feels good to just relax.
Just relax.
It feels
relax
good
and gather yourself.
and gather myself. It feels really good.
And you have 2 boys, right?
I have 2 boys at home. Yes, they're 12 and 13. Well, 11 and 12. They're going on 12 and 13.
I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked Kevin Parker. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Actually, in 5 years, I do see myself writing, but I want to just write at my leisure.
Right.
I like to probably write and help my children. Hopefully, they'll be in college and travel, because my husband and I, we have an RV, so we love to travel. So just writing and travel at my leisure. I don't want to be where I have to have a deadline, because I'm so scared of deadlines. So just basically traveling and enjoying my family.
Oh, that is wonderful. I am so excited for you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is T.L. Criswell, and you saw her here second, because she's been here first. She was here when The Peacemaker came out. And you'd love this book. You'll love this book because, as it says, she goes back to the Great Depression even. I like the fact that you incorporated history. History is so important,
Yes.
And we don't want to repeat it either, some of the bad history.
Right.
So, good luck,
Thank you.
and thank you for coming on the show.
Awesome.
I just love you. I just think so much of you.
Okay.
And ladies and gentlemen, at Table Talk today, we're talking about everything from, well, what's going on internationally to Patti LaBelle's pies. I don't understand it. We'll talk in just a minute, so stay tuned for Table Talk in just a few. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miss Perry.